Hi Sharon, how are you doing? You actually look really excited.
I am. You know why?
Our dog hasn't lost weight.
No, Compo is still on his diet. I'm excited because it's our first podcast today.
And you've got...
John Parker.
You never.
Yeah, Technical Director of the Arboricultural Association. I'm so pleased.
I love John Parker. I've heard him on so many things in the lockdown. He's just the most brilliant host. And he's so passionate about his industry. It's
He
fantastic.
is. Do you know he's actually done a TEDx talk as well? And he's got a really interesting background. He worked for Transport for London for 10 years.
Wow.
And
that's a tough job. I tell you, trees over railway lines.
Yeah, tough job. He did well. And at the same time, he was on the exec committee and he chaired the London Tree Officers Association, and he was a director of the National Tree Officers Association. He's been really busy. And do you know what? To top it all, in 2018, he was named Young European Forester of the Year. I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
Brilliant. Let's let him get on with it. I'll play us out.
This is Tree Lady Talks, and you're listening to Sharon Durden-Hollenby. All production and music is by Noel Durden-Hollenby, and all views expressed by me or the interviewee are our own. First of all, thank you so much for joining our first podcast. It's really exciting.
Thank you.
I think a lot of our listeners may not know about the role of a tree officer, because I think that's how you really started. Could you just sort of go back a bit and tell us how you got involved with working with trees?
Yeah, sure. Well, I had a bit of a roundabout route into arboriculture. I started off doing law at university, and I didn't complete that course, I hasten to add, but I started doing law. Then I went and worked in pubs for a bit, and then someone suggested to me that it might be something I'd be interested in to work with trees, and I didn't really know that there was any opportunity to work with trees. I'd never heard of that as a viable kind of career option, and I was probably about 23, 24 or something, so I heard about it quite late really. And I went off to Merris Wood and I did my national diploma in arboriculture, and then sort of fell out of that into a tree management role at Transport for London. Didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. I'm not sure I know what I'm doing now, but I certainly didn't know what I was doing then. And in terms of the tree officer side of things, the organisation that really helped me when I first got into the industry was the London Tree Officers Association.
Yeah.
As you know, I've sort of worked with a lot over the years, and they were just so helpful to me, I suppose, in offering me a community of tree officers. In an organisation like TFL, where there's tens of thousands of people work there was only 2 or 3 of us at the time working in trees. So it can be quite an isolating experience when you're the only tree professional in the whole office, and the LTOA really gave me that community and network that I was sort of looking for.
Yes, I mean, a few things have come out of that. One of which is your sort of slightly unusual path to work in trees, you know, having part of a law degree and then working in a pub. Don't you think that having a bit of a different background is really helpful, though, doing the work that you do, because you just have a broader perspective? I mean, I did all sorts of things before I came into trees.
I think in anything it's good to have a bit of a range of experience and different skills, and it's good to sort of take a bit of time, I suppose, to figure out what it is you want to do. I find our industry really interesting. I don't know if you share this, but I find that there's a lot of quite odd people in arboriculture, and I probably count both of us in that. But it's quite weird. In the nicest possible way, there's a lot of people who could probably be earning an awful lot more money or have a lot more profile in completely different industries, but are drawn to work with trees. And I think there's a particular mindset that tree people have, where, you know, we work with these living things that have been around sometimes for hundreds of years before we got there, and will be there for hundreds of years afterwards. We don't necessarily ever see the sort of fruits of our labour. And I think it takes a slightly unusual mindset to take that on as a career, really.
It is a passion, it's a vocation, because we just know how important trees are. And also, it's such an interesting job. I can't think of many professions that take on board the science of arboriculture, the art of arboriculture, the problem solving, the people skills, which is a huge part of all of our work, particularly if you work for a council, and just really mechanics, biology, social science, and we know that trees are so important as climate change solution. It's hugely varied, and you know, for most people it's not particularly well paid, but it's just exciting every single day. And the other thing that came out of your the story of how you got into your work is the mentoring side of things, because I too worked as a tree and landscape officer in the late 80s, and I felt really isolated and didn't know where to turn. And I think that anybody in whatever job they're doing listening to this, just joining up with other people doing the same work, it just gives you that support and kind of explodes your mind, really.
And not being afraid to ask for help as well, and to say that you don't know, because what I found was, you know, any professional problem that I was encountering, someone else had already dealt with that, and they'd found the way through it, and they had stories to tell from their successes or their failures. And being able to bounce ideas around with, you know, some of the names that involved people like Al Smith, Paul Akers, Dave Lofthouse, people who just worked for several years and just so open and willing to share their information and their knowledge. It was just a privilege, really.
Oh, totally. I had the same experience in Essex, really. People were just marvellous. But you worked for Transport for London then as an arboricultural officer. So that role, what did you do in a sort of day-to-day job, so people understand what Transport for London, they may not even know that they care about trees, but in fact they have a huge tree stock, don't they?
Yeah, so Transport for London is responsible for, really, as the name suggests, running all of the transport in London. And I was particularly working within the surface transport, so the Red Route network of some of the busiest arterial roads in London. And my responsibility was to do with planting trees, instructing pruning and work to be done, tree removal, looking into different aspects of tree policy and some of the procedures that we were developing there. And as I say, we had a small team, but it was really, really great. There was just, I think, 3 of us for a while, then 4 of us working in different parts of London. And a lot of liaison work with other professionals in Transport for London, of course, mostly highway engineers and landscapers and designers, but also with our local authority tree officer counterparts as well. It was really important to build those relationships with tree officers working across the 33 boroughs that we dealt with.
Absolutely. And the fundamental thing is Transport for London want to keep the trees they have and plant more. So that's great. And from there you made, I think, a brilliant move of being a technical officer for the Arboricultural Association.
It's a year tomorrow, I think it is. It's a year ago this week. It feels like I've been here a lot longer, in a good way, I should add, in a good way. But yeah, so I moved to work at the Arboricultural Association. So I was living in Stonehouse in Gloucestershire and commuting into London every day for probably 5 or 6 years, which is about 4 hours travelling a day, and sort of felt like it was time for a bit of a new challenge. And this opportunity opened up at the Arb Association, which is also based in Stonehouse. So it's an awful lot closer to me, but also just a great opportunity to broaden out my experience and my horizons in arboriculture and to really get more involved in some of the stuff I've always enjoyed doing.
Oh, absolutely. And we're recording this in a time of the pandemic where all organisations, I'm including the Institute of Chartered Foresters as well, we've had to reach people differently. And I think it's been fantastic. You have brilliantly hosted in a really powerful way the Arborist Question Time, which was every other Monday for a while, and also the live webinars on a Wednesday every fortnight. And the beauty of doing this, and we've done a similar thing with Members Hour, but you reach a far greater number of people. You can reach people all over the world. And I think also that some people are a bit shy at a conference, clearly not me and you, John, but you know, the sort of act of putting up your hand and asking a question can be quite daunting.
Yeah.
But actually doing the chat function and raising questions that way feels a lot safer. So you're getting more points of view come across. I think it's been brilliant. What's your take on it?
I'm really pleased with how it's all gone. I think obviously the coronavirus situation is terrible for an awful lot of people, but we've managed to adapt quite quickly, I think, and take a lot of what we do online. I mean, at the association, we do lots of training, we hold lots of events, and all of that, of course, was cancelled for the whole year. But I think we managed to adapt quite quickly to this using Zoom as a webinar function. And I should say that, you know, I just do the easy bit where I do the talking on the night, but there's a whole team of people who actually do the logistics and do the marketing and all that kind of stuff. So I just get to swan up at the last minute and chat for a bit and then go home again. So it's a team effort. We've got a great team here. But the opportunity that's arisen is for us to, I guess, in a way, sort of democratize some of this information. I think a lot of the time, the quality of speakers, some of the best people in the world, the only people who have access to those speakers are those who can afford to take the time and pay to go to conferences, which can often be very expensive. It can take you 3 or 4 days. And through webinars, we can get all these fantastic, wonderful people, all of whom, by the way, have spoken for free, all of whom have just given up their time and their knowledge freely, and beam these people directly into the offices and the living rooms of anyone who's interested. And in doing that, we've kind of brought together a bit of an international community. We've had 62 countries in total have been watching the webinars over the 12 weeks that we were running that particular series. And it's just been lovely to see that community develop, really. And as you say, people talking in the chat function, sharing ideas, linking up with each other. I regularly receive emails saying, oh, do you think you could put me in touch with this person? And then we'll speak to the speaker and check they're happy. But you can see these links sort of forming, and it's lovely that the association's been able to facilitate some of that.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. I think a lot of professional bodies are doing the same thing. So, I mean, I think it's really exciting. And I know that one of the things you wanted to talk about was green equity. Perhaps you could just explain a bit more about that.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's some wonderful papers that we can share links for that people can read about, people who actually know about this. But a very basic description, I suppose, would be that we all understand now, hopefully, that trees bring benefits and the green infrastructure bring benefit to people. But who is it who's actually getting those benefits? Are those benefits equally distributed across societies and across demographics in urban areas? And the answer is, of course, no, they're not. And typically, the people who benefit are the wealthier areas, and there's various different ethnic and gender divides as well. And the idea of green equity really is looking at why that is and how we can address it. And I think it's something that we should be thinking about a lot more in our industry in the UK. There's some great work being done. I particularly recommend people look at the work of Lorien Nesbitt at the University of British Columbia, and Nanamshla Gwedla down in South Africa, who's been doing some very similar work. So read that, learn about it. And it's something that I think we should be talking more about, but it hasn't really happened yet. But what this coronavirus crisis has done that in a way helps with this, I think, is it's demonstrated to everybody the importance of green space. You know, we've all been stuck inside our houses to a greater or lesser extent, and people who've got access to gardens are in a better situation than people who don't have access to gardens. And those who don't have access to gardens, for them, the public parks, the trees on their streets are even more important. Yeah. So, you know, this virus has not affected us all equally. It is disproportionately affected the groups that you would expect it to disproportionately affect. Yeah. And how can a more equitable approach to green infrastructure and trees, how could that have helped people, and how can we move out of this in a more positive way?
Totally agree. And some of the work that's been carried out by the iTree studies, which is a spatial mapping program, I'll put a link to those 2 papers on our website, and also to iTree, where they're able to map high density tree cover and low density tree cover, and then overlay that on social demographic data and health data. And it's really chilling in a way to see that those greener, leafier spaces tend to have people who are generally healthier and wealthier, and how much does one lead to the other and vice versa. And there are huge movements, and quite right too, to redress that balance, because the benefits of trees are social and economic, not just ecological. And that's something that I know that we both feel really, really passionately about.
It ties into another issue that I know we're both also passionate about, but one of the reasons that, when I speak to these wonderful academics who actually know an awful lot about this stuff and have researched it, one of the reasons that is sometimes given for this disproportionate enjoyment of the benefits that trees offer is to look a little bit higher and look at the decision makers and who's actually making the decisions, who's in those positions of influence. And, kind of understandably, probably unconscious bias rather than anything deliberate. But if you have a group of decision makers who are exclusively white, male, middle class, then that's probably going to be the way things kind of go downstream. And that, I think, is another issue of our industry. And how can we increase diversity in our industry? How can we have proper representation from everybody in our industry? And I think I'm probably not the right person to be leading the challenge on diversity, but it's important that we're all aware of it, and it's something we're really keen to address.
You're listening to Tree Lady Talks, today with John Parker. We need to have a diverse workforce because, well, that's just the right thing to do. We are disproportionately male, white, and I wouldn't say middle class, but it's too much that way. And I know that we're all working to increase diversity. Women are about, what's the percentage of women members in the Arbor Association? Is it about 10-15%?
I think it's around 10%, yeah.
Yeah, it's higher in the Institute of Child Foresters, but it's still a minority. But we both want to reach ethnic minorities and people of all abilities as well. And I think the way forward, the more that we're doing sort of public facing, and that's one of the reasons for this podcast really, is to let people know it's a job.
Yeah.
Because it's hard enough getting people of any description to come into our industry, and yet it's such a brilliant job to do. People don't know that you can be a tree officer, that you can be a tree consultant, that you can work for an organisation to help with trees. So it's a real passion for everybody, and I'm really excited because I think it's going to make a difference. But we have to sort of speak outside of our industry, and I know that you do that, John. You did a TED talk, didn't you, recently?
I did a TEDx talk, yeah.
That's brilliant. So that had a wide audience. So we just need to keep banging that drum. And
I think it's important as well. Sorry, Sharon, but the going into schools, telling people at a young age as well. But like I said, I probably got to maybe even my mid-20s really before I realised that arboriculture was even a thing, and that it was a career that you could go into. And why aren't we doing more as an industry to go into schools, to go into education? We often try and just talk to students when they've already decided they want to do something land-based. We should be talking to people much earlier, all across the country, regardless of sort of socioeconomic status or anything else, and just telling people that this is an important and viable career and something they could do that, as you said at the beginning, it covers so many different areas. It's science, it's kind of art in a way, it's social. It's such a fantastic career, and we need to be telling as many people as possible that it's something they can consider and that it's something for them, regardless of anything.
I agree with you. I think there's a perception that you always need to get your hands dirty or wield a chainsaw. But I mean, there are some arborists who have a brilliant career doing that. But the sort of job that we're talking about, it isn't really about getting your hands dirty. And I've actually never climbed a tree. It's my guilty secret. I'm too scared. So it is for everybody. And there's fantastic forest school movements. So I think there's a lot of wonderful organisations, Learning Through Landscapes, the Forestry Commission, going into schools, talking about the benefits of wildlife and creepy crawlies and making campfires, etc., which is brilliant. We just also need to sort of take that a step further. And I've had an idea that I haven't acted on yet, but if we just had a scheme like just one school, if each member of an organisation or anybody who worked with trees would just visit one school, can you imagine the impact that might have? Because, I mean, I love going into schools and planting trees and, talking to the children, but I'll say, hey, it's a job. And when I've been doing a lot of surveys on social housing estates in London recently, and people come up and have a chat, which is wonderful. And I said, by the way, this is a job and it's fabulous. So, I mean, I don't want to be like an evangelical bore, but that is part of what we're doing here as well. So,
well, I think most people have no idea that it is a thing, that arboriculture is a thing. I mean, how much, I know you're supposed to be asking me questions, but how much do you think the word arboriculture is responsible for that, Sharon? Do you think it's a word that people can't grasp? Do you think that's a barrier to people?
Well, judging by, I mean, I've been working for a really long time. The number of names that I used to be called, like arborologist, arborist. You're one of them arbo things, aren't you? Can you take a tree report? I just say, hello, it's a tree lady.
Yeah.
And people, number one, even in a formal meeting, because I work in construction, so I may be in a meeting with 10 people, structural engineers, engineers, architects, etc. And they go around the table and I say, hello, I'm Sharon, the tree lady. And I know you already think I'm odd, so that's okay. But it always gets a little tittle, you know, and people go, who I am, and I answer the phone and I say, oh, it's Sharon, the tree lady here, just phoning you about such and such. So I'm not suggesting that we remove the word arboriculturist or arboriculture, but I think that we don't necessarily have to use our formal titles all the time. It's about being approachable. And it also, I think, for some people, it might, I mean, I'm dyslexic, so I actually find the word hard to say myself. So I actually think that by breaking down all barriers where possible, by just being human and saying, oh, I'm just come here to look at your trees and this is a good job. But I'm not proposing that we all change our names. I'm not going to do anything controversial. That's just my thoughts. What are yours?
No, I agree. I think it's interesting. It's a balance, isn't it? We want to retain our sort of professional scientific side, and arboriculture is an important term for that. But equally, it's quite hard to, I mean, I'm finding it's quite hard to almost promote this as an industry and as a career when most people have never heard of the word. So it's a difficult balancing act, isn't it?
So what other solutions do you think we can do to get the message out there? What would be your dream scenario?
I think that at the moment trees are probably higher up the public and political agenda than certainly before in my career, and I think for many years. And there's different reasons for that, but part of it is the climate crisis. People are becoming more aware, and there's a danger that everybody's just seeing chucking in billions of trees is going to fix the climate crisis when it's not. But it has driven trees right up the agenda, and people are talking about trees and thinking about trees like never before. My dream scenario would be if people started realizing it's not just about chucking trees in the ground, it's about establishing trees, and it's that people look after those trees as well. And in the years before you plant a tree, you've got, you know, people working on the nursery who are producing those trees, doing an amazing technical skilled job there. Then you've got tree officers or landscapers who are selecting the species, excavating the pit, building a pit, maybe using technology like some of the suppliers and companies that we work with who are doing great work improving soil and rooting conditions. Then you go and plant the tree, and that's fantastic, but that's probably about 20 minutes. And then after that, you've got 3 years maybe of young tree maintenance and of pruning and of mulching and of stake and tie maintenance and all these things. And then you've got another 50, 60, 100 years of maintenance and inspections. And at each stage of that process, there are professional people doing a brilliant job making those things happen. And I think people generally don't think about trees at all, but now if they do think about trees, they think of that bit where you just chuck the tree in the ground. And so I suppose my dream situation would be that people realize there's a lot more to it than that, and that it takes people and professionals are doing that work.
Absolutely brilliantly explained, actually, right from conception, because we're not saying as an industry, oh, this is really terrible, they're planting trees. We're absolutely not. We're saying actually the true measure is successful establishment. And also buy-in by the local community as well. You know, what do the local community think about this? Do they want those trees? Do they know of a better place? Might they get involved with the planting? But much more important, the watering and the maintenance, because we can't just bung trees in the ground with political gusto and say we planted X million. We have to nurture them, because we know that that will make a real difference. And also, it's going to provide employment opportunities.
Yeah,
I mean, it's one. We're in this terrible pandemic, and I wasn't making light of it, saying that this has been opportunities for social media, but actually, there are green jobs to be had, and there is going to be rising unemployment, which is really sad. I know people who've been made redundant in my own family. And so this is an opportunity. Can we please join up the dots where we're investing people who are going to care for these trees, who are going to plan properly for these trees? There's also...
It's important as well, Matt, Sharon, that in this desperate quest for economic recovery, that we don't start abandoning our environmental commitments and our employment rights and employment legislation, everything, that it's not all sort of swept away as red tape. You know, we need to make sure that this is a human recovery as well as an economic recovery.
Totally agree with that, and doing things in a different way. So it needs to all be considered, but there is opportunity here, and where everything is moving so quickly, it's so difficult, I'm sure, to get everything right, but we have to keep shouting out. And I think also that we need to keep shouting out into the media as well, if they'll be receptive to us beyond the tree planting numbers.
Yeah, and the media relations is very important, and it can be very, very useful. But unfortunately, I think one of the problems we have with the tree planting message we're trying to get across is that you can get a headline if you say we're going to plant 1 million trees.
Yeah.
If a politician says I'm going to plant 1 million trees, that'll get a headline. Nobody's ever going to give you a headline for saying this year we're going to properly maintain and establish and mulch 10,000 trees. Yeah. That's not very sexy. We like the sexy numbers of tree planting, and that's what gets the headlines. And it's a bit like we've seen with pests and diseases and everything. You know, the media get onto a new pest and disease, and they'll make contact with different people, and they don't want to publish the opinion of the professional who's saying, well, it might be quite bad, but we're hoping we can control it through careful monitoring and management. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear the person going, everything's going to die, it's dangerous, we're going to... And that's the message that gets through. So it's going to be, it's difficult with the media sometimes.
Yes, because they just want that 3-minute soundbite and move on. But I mean, ours is always going to be a really long story, because trees live for a really, really long time, and that isn't sexy sound bites. But we are moving in the right direction, but we mustn't get this wrong, because I think history will judge us, really, with climate change. Yeah,
absolutely.
What other big passions do you have about the industry at the moment that you'd like to share? You're a great thinker, John.
Oh, goodness me, I wouldn't say that. One thing, again, it's an opportunity really that's come around partly because of this crisis. So it does always feel a bit bad to say, but you know, there is good to come out of this. And one of the things is this international collaboration. I've always been very keen on international collaboration. I've always been very passionate about the idea of sharing ideas and experience with people who do our job in other countries, learning how they do things. And the more, I've been very lucky in the last few years, I've been able to go around to quite a few different conferences, and I've been involved in some international projects. And the more I talk to our friends and colleagues in other countries, the more I realise that we all face exactly the same problems. Yes. We all have exactly the same things to deal with, and it doesn't matter what country you're in. When you're speaking at a conference, particularly about the experiences of being a tree manager, the audience will be nodding along as you say certain things. And but where we can learn from each other is the way that we deal with those things and how we overcome those problems. And so I've always been passionate about international collaboration, but this situation and these webinars we've been doing and things like you're doing here with this interview, really, it's kind of brought the world closer together, I think. And it's never been easier for us to share ideas internationally and to bring voices in from other countries that don't necessarily get heard normally. And that's something I'm very passionate about, and something that we've been trying to make happen as best we can in the last few months.
Totally agree with you. And whilst different countries maybe at different stages because of different pressures, we can still learn from those emerging arboricultural industries. Like India is an emerging arboricultural industry, for example, and we can learn their fresh insight for doing it for the first time. And equally in the UK, we probably have, good experience, a detailed experience of working with development that perhaps other countries, in my experience, are not at that stage yet. So we can help them. So we kind of want to speed things up for everybody, and we need that novel, new approach as well. So that's absolutely brilliant.
And I think as well, what a lot of people in our industry in the UK don't realise, I think, as well, is how well regarded UK arboriculture is. It's quite easy to sort of, beat up where you're from and kind of complain that things are better elsewhere. But one of the other things that I've realised as I've travelled around the place is that UK arboriculture is very well regarded, and some of the people who work in our industry over here, people like Ted Green, people like Jill Butler, Neville Fay, these are names that are hugely respected internationally, and so it's good to get that different perspective as well. But equally, we need to be very careful not to create a sort of colonial arboriculture. We're not going to other countries and saying this is how we do it, this is how you should do it. I think there's real dangers to be had there. That never works out too well. It's trying to learn from what everyone else is doing and then try and work together to improve for the good of everybody.
That's exactly the point I was making, because I too have had that experience of going around the hardly been anywhere, but I've been around a bit. And because of our planning system, making no judgment one way or the other, we do tend to have a lot of experience on going on construction sites and supervising. But equally, I make the point that those emerging arboricultural industries can see things with fresh eyes and teach us something new. So it's absolutely a two-way conversation, which we can now all do on Zoom. It's not the same, but I mean, for now, it's good enough. So that's brilliant. I wonder if have you picked up any top tips through all of your interviews? Has something really stood out to you as being a new and novel idea from all the people you've interviewed in the last 3 months that struck you thinking, gosh, that's great, we're going to jump all over that? Or has it really just been an infusion of enthusiasm and knowledge that's just powering you forward?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I think I finish every one of those webinars and I sort of sit back and you switch the camera off and I kind of go, wow. And I just feel like I've just been bombarded with this incredible amounts of information. And it's every one of them I have genuinely found inspiring. I'm not saying that, I just find it brilliant. I think the problem for me at the moment probably is as soon as you finish one, you're straight on to the next one. So you might only get a couple of hours to sort of go, oh, that was good. And then move on afterwards. But I think there's certainly just been a lot of quite inspirational work around the place. The webinar we did looking at arboriculture in Latin America, I found totally inspiring. That again highlighted for me just how we all just have exactly the same problems but deal with it in different ways. And I learned so much from how they're doing things over there. Hearing from people like Rupert Bentley-Walls, who he's been a friend for many years, and he's a great bloke and a great tree officer. But when he did Arborist Question Time and talked about some of the tree planting they've been doing in Hackney, and I know a lot of the stuff that he's been doing over the years, and I've always thought it was brilliant. But you almost see it through other people's eyes when you're watching it on a webinar. You're thinking how the audience is looking at it, and it's just incredible what Rupert's achieved in Hackney over a number of years, and that the arboretum he's created there, and it's just all been brilliant. But there's several people who've sort of stood out, to be honest. The ancient tree one we had with Jill Butler and Kamil Witkos from Poland again is just inspirational. Also, whenever we have someone speaking for another country, I always spend the next few days thinking I've got to go out there, I've got to go to that country and visit it. So I'm building up an extensive list of places to visit. But I think almost more inspirational, I suppose, in a way, has been every now and then I'll have emails from people in the audience who from countries that maybe don't have an arboriculture industry really, who say, oh, that was really interesting, I saw this thing, and could you send me a link to this paper or whatever it is? And I'm not giving them any useful information, I'm just signposting them to other things. But it's really great that's where I think it's inspirational, when you have people who just want to make things better in their own areas, whether it's in a local authority in the UK or whether it's somewhere in the Far East, or it's just great.
It is just great. And the underlying thread through all of that is passion, because we know that trees really, really matter to people's lives. And going back to Rupert Bentley-Walls, who's a tree officer at Hackney Council, by arboretum, what you mean most thrillingly about that word, it's an arboretum in the streets. It's not something you pay to go and have a look at in the traditional sense. People are getting involved with planting the trees in their streets, looking after those trees. And there's a huge diversity of species, which is really giving other people ideas. So it's all about passion. And on that note, John, you are one of the leading passionate advocates for trees, and I just really want to thank you for your time today, and wish you well, and I'm just looking with excitement at what you're going to do next.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that. It's fun. You know, we're all having fun, and we're all working towards the same, in the same direction, I guess. And what I love about arboriculture is everyone's very open with their knowledge and their information and their contacts, and it just does feel like one big community. And it's nice to be involved in it. And I really appreciate being invited to do this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. All right. Well, I look forward to receiving those links, which will be on the website. So thank you.
Well, what a fantastic interview. I mean, I do like John because he's just so passionate about what he does. He wants to get the message out to as many people as he can. He wants to get it in schools. He wants just so many things that your industry really, really needs. I think it's brilliant.
I know, and I loved it when he talked about listening to people from around the world and how this terrible pandemic has made people connect more over the internet. And also this idea of green equity, delivering trees where they're really needed. And he just explained so clearly why the tree planting targets are not just about putting the tree in the ground. There's so much more. Wow, thank you, John.
Brilliant. More people like John Parker. Honestly, the world will be a better place. Thank you, John, so much for that. It was superb. What have we got next week, Sharon?
We have another John. We have John Ryan, the Arboricultural Manager from the London Borough of Islington. He's going to be talking about something called iTree, which is that spatial mapping we touched upon in this interview. So if you love this podcast, hit the subscribe button. There's going to be one every week. Thank you for listening.